podcast is brought to you by Schema Business School.
Hello and welcome back to Doing Business in Europe. We are today filming from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we are at Harvard University, where we have been able to learn about China, its role in the world, and also European investment. Now we have the pleasure of having Dr. Heinrich Voss with us, who is at Leeds University as research fellow. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
You have presented your work and your studies about Chinese investment in Europe and also European investment in China. Could you give us some details about the current state and the flows and also impacts of Chinese investment in the EU in particular?
Would be a pleasure. The Chinese investments into Europe has increased over the last couple of years significantly. And if you follow the general press and media, there's a talk of Chinese buying out European Union and European businesses. Following data published by Eurostat, or as well as data published by the Chinese official government, this can hardly be stated to be correct. Certainly Chinese investment has increased since the mid-2000s and is now standing at around 8 billion US dollar terms. But compare this to the significance of Chinese investments coming to the European Union as in comparison to overall inward investment, it still accounts for less than 1% of all inward investment to the European Union. Hence the amount of Chinese investments we currently see being attracted to the European Union is rather limited. This then has immediate implication on the impact we can expect from Chinese investments. Generally speaking, we would expect similar positive aspects from Chinese investments to the European host economies as we see from other investments. Given the small scale of Chinese investments, though, the impact is currently rather limited.
Now, how about the Chinese outward FDI stocks? If you look at them overall, as you've studied them in your paper with Jeremy Clegg, Jean Monnet Chair at Leeds University as well?
The majority of Chinese stock of outward investment is destined to Asia. Asia is recording some 226 billion US dollars of Chinese investments, and is by far the largest receiver of direct investments. Second to this comes Latin America with some 44 billion US dollars as recorded by 2010. These kind of data have to be taken with a grain of salt, as the majority of investments into these regions is going to Hong Kong, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, which are known to be tax havens and offshore financial centers, and they're generally used for transshipping financial flows rather than being the final destination of investment. If you take Chinese investments overall, some 80% is going to any kind of tax haven offshore financial center, which is generally not the final destination. As the Chinese organizations are reporting it, 16 billion of Chinese investments as valued in US dollars by 2010 is going to the European Union. But if you consider investments going through Hong Kong, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, this is likely to be a higher figure.
So this is actually something that supports very much our perception that China in its investments in Asia is becoming more and more regional, and that the production network locations are much more regional than global altogether. Certainly China is going to be embedded into the overall emergence and motion of free trade arrangements and regional trade agreements as they are registered at the WTO. Could you let us know about the data that you've used to come to those conclusions?
The data we are using is coming from multiple sources because of the difficulties of pinpointing down Chinese investments. We're using MOFCOM data, which is data from the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, data from from Eurostat, as well as data from different European member states. In addition to this, we have extra data sources for Chinese acquisitions of European businesses. The data as it is from these different sources doesn't correspond well with each other. When you, for example, look at the Chinese data, there's huge investment in Luxembourg recorded, as well as investments in Belgium and Spain. Looking at the Eurostat data, which is supposedly getting the data from the different member states, there is no investment in Luxembourg, there is none in Belgium or Spain. And when you dig further into the, for example, numbers of investments in different European member states, the data Eurostat is publishing and some of the local statistical offices are publishing doesn't correspond with the data government organizations are publishing. For the United Kingdom, the UK Trade and Investment is, for example, stating that there are 400 or 500 Chinese investments in the UK. When you look at the data published by ONS, we come to 50 Chinese investments, and Eurostat is reporting similarly small figures.
So how do you explain this divergence of data that you found?
Well, there are different ways of recording and collecting data. The European member states or statistical offices are not necessarily allowed to record or publish certain investments by smaller businesses, are not allowed or not willing to report investments by large businesses in one sector if it's an only investment to protect these investors.
Now, when we look at regional trade agreements, for example, we see that more and more is happening on the level between, say, the EU and Asia, and also the US and Asia. Just thinking of the free trade agreement with South Korea, but also that is being negotiated with Japan. How do you see the future of Chinese investments in the EU in this type of context?
I see scope for an increase of Chinese investments in the European Union. And this is mainly due to the aspect that the European Union is home to a number of technologically very well advanced businesses and internationally very well established bonds and distribution channels organized from here. Chinese businesses that seek to expand their international footprint and seek to internationalize their business further will be at some point forced to upgrade their technological base as well and develop their own proprietary technologies, patents, etc. This can be achieved more quickly by either acquiring European businesses which possess these types of technologies or by tapping into the pool of knowledge existing within Europe. This will not necessarily lead to large-scale investments by Chinese businesses, especially when they're just setting up knowledge-seeking and listening posts. But it might lead to a number of further acquisitions of European businesses where Chinese businesses see a strategic fit between the technology they can acquire and integrate in their own organization. We will also probably see further investments in manufacturing businesses and setting up of production facilities in Europe. And this could follow the pattern of South Korean investments, which is more focusing on the Central and Eastern European countries, which is a very different pattern of investment as we have seen from Japanese investments, which focus more on the Western economies.